This is Part 2, Episode 8. Xiao Yi Cai, feeling lost, took another glance towards that direction, but only saw the neat rows of houses, silent, couldn't look any more normal. He did not give it much thought, and only followed Tian Bu Yi into the hall. The two figures disappeared into the observed silence hall. The quiet atmosphere again enveloped the mountains of Big Bamboo Valley. After a period of time, suddenly in the corridors of that stretch of houses, a silhouette flashed. It was ghostly. He silently gazed towards the direction of observed silence hall for a moment and then turned and following a once extremely familiar winding corridor, unhurriedly walked in. Probably because this was in the afternoon. Not a single disciple was seen. In his memory, the most often heard sounds other than junior sister Tian Linger's crisp and clear laughters would be Du Bai Shu's shouts with a tinge of dejection, because he must have lost another bet. Then, Big Brother Song Daran and the rest deep and resounding laughters would be heard. The other senior brothers would also add on their jokes, and for that most unremarkable little disciple, most likely would also be smiling in one of the corner. Not long after, the past, in the unhurried footsteps sounds, gently flipped over. Those old stories as if engraved in every tile, pillar and buildings, echoed beside him. Initially Ghostly's face was dazed. Gradually it changed. The ice-like expression quietly receded. The past was actually this soul-stirring. Even after many years he still could not forget it. If everything had not changed. He stood in the faint sunlight of the corridor, slowly sat down onto the low railings. The warm and pleasant sunlight shone onto his face, like a decade ago. There were footsteps and conversations, traveling far from the back, approaching. It was Big Bamboo Valley 4th disciple, He Daiji, and 6th disciple, Du Bai Shu. Two of them walked side by side approaching, and when their figures appeared, Ghostly had already like an apparition, suddenly disappeared. The mountain breeze blew past, the trees and vegetation swayed. Nobody knew where exactly he was hiding. He Daiji and Du Bai Shu obviously did not notice anything. Both of them whispering and slowly walked past. Du Bai Shu was also carrying a wooden bucket, filled half with water, a rag draped beside, like he was going somewhere to clean up. And they walked forward and soon arrived at a door of a house. Du Bai Shu shrugged his shoulders at He Daiji. He Daiji smiled and both of them went in together. A moment later, Ghostly appeared from another corner of the winding corridor, his eyes' expression complicated and looking ahead. The room that the two people, who were once his senior brothers entered, was actually his when he was still Zhong Xiao Fan Big Bamboo Valley most junior disciple. However, that house should have been abandoned for many years. Why did the two senior brothers still go in? Ghostly quietly drifted over. Suddenly, like sinking into an old dream, he stood nonplussed at the door. In this little courtyard, everything was exactly the same as before. There was still a narrow path made of crushed stones. There were still verdant green grasses. Even that small pine tree was still growing there. Just that over the years, it had already grown much sturdier. The sound of water was heard from inside the house, following which Du Bai Shu and He Da's voices were heard. 4th senior brother, why don't you try to explain? After so many years, why does teacher still want us to clean up this house? Isn't this deliberately trying to make me suffer? He Daiji scolded laughingly. Stinking brat, you are trying to loaf on the job again, right? I am telling you first, teacher is still fuming over big senior brother's matter. You better don't provoke him, if not teacher would for sure skin you alive. Du Bai Shu, he laughed dryly, said, Senior brother, you are joking with me again. How would I dare to provoke teacher? Just that little junior brother has already left for more than a decade, yet teachers still order us to maintain this place as it is, cleaning it every day. I really do not know what is he thinking in his heart. That figure standing outside the house, stood erect stiff, slowly lowered his head. From the house, He Daiji was silent for a while and instead sighed, quietly said, although teacher never talked about little junior brother all these years, but we all know that in his heart, his favorite is junior brother Xiao Fan. Du Bai Shu's voice said, yes. This I can tell too. To tell you the truth, sometimes I also miss little junior brother. But what use is that? Little junior brother right now has already become another person. Don't tell me he would still return to Big Bamboo Valley, again become Zhong Xiao Fan, and be our 7th junior brother. Outside the window, Ghostly's expression turned more and more indifferent. His body was still straight, just that his two hands were clenched into a fist, gripping tighter and tighter. Can we turn back? The steps that you strided in the time, the roads that you have crossed, many years later, do you still remember to look back? Do you still want to go back? The warm sunlight on his body, yet felt like being cast in ice. He Daj and Du Baishu also turned silent, as if inadvertently this topic made them also felt heavy and wordless. After tidying up for a while, carrying a bucket out, he Daj gently shut the door. He watched the green grasses in the small courtyard, the pine tree swaying, although the scenery had a look of spring, but it always had some feeling of loneliness. As if without the owner of the house, even the scenery of spring also turned pale. He shook his head, sighed and left with Du Baishu. After a long time, ghostly from behind that pine tree, slowly walked out. The familiar mountain breeze blew past his face, ruffling his hair. He walked to the room door, raised his right hand and placed it on the door. His movement was very slow, as if his hands were heavily leaden, even his face expression, he looked like he couldn't breathe. However, that strange inexplicable feeling, like an invisible force, finally pushed open the door. Just like opening a window of the past, looking into the past time. That familiar bed, that familiar tables and chairs, as well as what was hanging on the wall. After those years the painting of Dao character already had a slight decayed yellow color, even the kettle and cups looked exactly the same. Who would know, this simple and plain room, how many times had it appeared in his dreams? Even the smell of the air here also seemed to carry a faint smell of the past. He slowly walked into the room, went to the bed and slowly sat down, gently stroked his bed bedding, the soft feeling traversed from his palm. Who would see him suddenly biting on his lip, that hard, that deep? In the observed silence hall, Qian Buyi and Xiao Yi Cai sat down together. Qian Buyi looked unsettled, facing Xiao Yi Cai, but his eyes were looking at another direction, as if contemplating something. Until Xiao Yi Cai coughed once and called out, "Qian teacher uncle." Qian Buyi, like being awakened, nodded his head and said, all right, say it. What does senior brother Daoxian want that requires you his favorite disciple to especially make a trip down? Xiao Yi Cai smiled and said, you flatter me, it is like this, benevolent teacher has two things, wish to ask Qian teacher uncle through disciple. Qian Buyi said, oh, say it. Xiao Yi Cai said, firstly, the number of good factions fellow members coming to Qingyun Hill is still increasing. The other branches have already received quite a number of people. Tongqian Peak has also arranged 100 over fellow friends to stay in the houses at mid-level of the mountain. However, even it is so, the residences are still not enough. So teacher wanted disciple to entreat teacher uncle, possible to arrange more of the good faction friends on Big Bamboo Valley. Qian Buyi's eyebrow twitched, glanced at Xiao Yi Cai. Xiao Yi Cai looked a little awkward, but still with a courtesy smile, said, teacher uncle, this is also for the imminent catastrophe, a last resort. And our Qingyun sect has always considered ourselves as the leader of good faction, we can't push our fellow friends out of the door, right? Qian Buyi snorted, said, don't treat me as a fool, those so-called righteous fellow friends, when it is really time to fight those demon beast monsters. Those that can really contribute is less than 30%, most of them probably only because of our fame, ran over here to take refuge. Xiao Yi Cai gave a wry smile, said, Qian teacher uncle over-exaggerate, but even if it is so, we can't push them out of the door. If we really do so, how would the world look at our Qingyun? For the sake of the overall situation, would have to request Qian teacher uncle to render more help. Qian Buyi rolled his eyes, suddenly seemed to think of something, his eyes suddenly lit up, a mocking smile revealed at the corner of his mouth, coughed once and his face revealed a righteous, or inspiring expression, said, since Daoxian's senior brother also said it like this, I shall not decline further. Anyway it is for the world good faction and the current situation, then let's do it that way. Xiao Yi Cai was overjoyed, cupped his hands and said, thank you teacher uncle. Qian Buyi smiled then suddenly raised his hand and said, just a minute, I have not finished. Xiao Yi Cai was startled for a moment, said, what? Qian teacher uncle please say. Qian Buyi smiled, said, since the calamity is imminent, everything should be for the sake of the current situation. I heard among our 7 branches, there is still one branch, seems like the branch which has more female disciples. Xiao Yi Cai, who was initially smiling, his face already stiff halfway, gradually could not smile anymore. Tian Bu Yi naturally smiled by himself, said, I remember in that branch, their terrain vast, and a few days ago I have been there, the number of empty houses are innumerable. Why is it that sect head senior brother, who has been brilliant his entire life, did not even think of this place? Xiao Yi Cai forced a smile, after a long while said, Tian teacher uncle, this. Tian Bu Yi snorted, his plump face looked up to the sky, silent. Xiao Yi Cai saw his expression, secretly shook his head, and could only said, yes, after disciple returns today, we'll take it to report to benevolent teacher, and ask him to make a decision. Tian Bu Yi did not speak, and his expression also did not change, only nodded his head, but he was feeling delighted in his heart, laughing secretly inside. Xiao Yi Cai composed himself for a moment, then said, then Tian teacher uncle, there is the second thing, but more important than the matter just now. Teacher has also repeatedly reminded, for teacher uncle to think carefully before answering. Tian Bu Yi saw Xiao Yi Cai's serious face, greatly different from before. Evidently this matter was not something trivial, could not help but feel stunned, nodded and said, oh, what is it that is so serious? Say it. Xiao Yi Cai lowered his voice, his expression turned slightly solemn, said, asking teacher uncle on teacher's behalf, the heaven's secret seal behind Big Bamboo Valley, is it still safe and sound? Tian Bu Yi's expression changed, suddenly stood up, stared at the Xiao Yi Cai. Xiao Yi Cai also slowly stood up, but took a step back instead. Tian Bu Yi watched Xiao Yi Cai for a while, his face's expression constantly changing. Initially was shocked and surprise. Slowly after calming down, he looked to be contemplating, and finally a strange glint seemed to flash past his eyes. He looked at Xiao Yi Cai. Suddenly said, seems like senior brother Daoxian really intended to pass his position of sect head to you in the future. Xiao Yi Cai slightly bowed, said, teacher uncle overstates, disciple dare not. Tian Bu Yi indifferently said, he even told you this matter, his intention is obviously very clear. Forget it, this is Tongtian Peak's matter, I can't be bothered to. But regarding the heaven's secret seal, he paused, in a deep voice said, this is no trivial matter, and even concerned Qingyun destiny. At that time Qingyi founder once commanded the Qingyun 7 branches leaders, not to use unless out of absolute necessity. He took a deep breath, said, the implications of it, all of us understands it very well. I just want to ask one question, does Daoxian senior brother really thought about this carefully? Xiao Yi Cai's expression at the moment was also very solemn, after deliberating for a long time, as if he dared not say the wrong word, nodded and said, yes, before disciple left, teacher had already solemnly instructed disciple. Tian Bu Yi after contemplating for a moment, said, other than Tongtian Peak and Big Bamboo Valley, what about the other 5 branches, heaven's secret seal? Xiao Yi Cai respectfully said, for this matter, teacher has only told disciple and no others, because teacher thinks that in Qingyun sect, Tian teacher uncle, is the most prestigious and noble, therefore especially came here first to seek teacher uncle's opinion. As for the other 5 branches, disciple will pay a visit to the various leaders later. Tian Bu Yi slowly nodded and sat back down. After thinking for a long time, he sighed and said, the situation before us has indeed come to a critical juncture. The fate of the common people are all depending on this war. If sect head senior brother wishes to go all out, I have nothing to say to. Just that after you go return, please relay one sentence to him for me. Xiao Yi Cai looking respectful, said, yes, Tian teacher uncle please say, disciple will definitely convey it. Tian Bu Yi's face slightly pale, said, once the 7 branches heaven's secret seals are removed, the vicious energy that Qingyun Hill suppressed for 1,000 years will inevitably be released, although there is still Zhuxian ancient celestial sword's energy to hold it and turn it into an unparalleled killing intention, but the severe damage to the sword holder corrodes the foundation of the cultivation. It is not a laughing matter. Daoxian senior brother's skills are exquisite and deep, but this is a serious matter. It is better to ask him to consider carefully, to guard against the unexpected. Xiao Yi Cai seriously said, yes, Tian teacher uncle's words, disciple will definitely convey it. After pausing for a moment, he continued, then if Tian teacher uncle has no other matter, disciple will first make a move. Tian Bu Yi nodded, did not speak. Xiao Yi saw his heavy mood, did not dare to speak more, slowly retreated out. In the observed silence hall, only Qian Buyuyi was left. He slowly turned around, looked at the Taoism Sanqing founder deity statue worshipped in the observed silence hall, his expression complicated. After a long while he only sighed and did not say anything. When Xiao Yi flew back to Tongtian Peak, it was already night, lights lit brightly on Tongtian Peak. So it was many of the senior Qingyun sect disciples, including the numerous good faction members, who had came to Qingyun, turning this paradise-like place into a slightly crowded and secular place. However, Xiao Yi did not have the mood to bother about these. He went straight to the peak where Crystal Hall was. After asking the whereabouts of Reverend Daoxian from Qingyun junior disciples in Crystal Hall, he headed for Reverend Daoxian's room at the inner quarters of Crystal Hall. Coming to a secluded area of the rear rooms, Xiao Yi stood before Reverend Daoxian's room door, composed himself, and was about to knock when Reverend Daoxian's voice was heard from the room, saying, "Is it Yi? Come on in." Xiao Yi was nonplussed for a moment, immediately respectfully said, "Yes." Then gently pushed open the door and went inside. The room was very spacious. All of the furnishings had a scholarliness quality. Other than a simple table, chairs and bed, were numerous books on the bookshelves placed at both sides of the room, many of which were old books, but were neatly placed on the shelves. They looked like they had been read many times by their owner. Reverend Daoxian was sitting beside the study desk, his hand holding an old scroll, was reading it when he saw Xiao Yi came in. He smiled and said, "You are back only now." Xiao Yi respectfully bowed and said, "Yes, teacher." Reverend Daoxian nodded his head and said, "How is it?" Xiao Yi said, "The 7 branches leaders did not have any objection, all said to follow teacher's intention, only Big Bamboo Valley Tian teacher uncle." Reverend Daoxian frowned and said, "Why, what different opinion does Tian junior brother has?" Xiao Yi quickly said, "It is not so. Tian teacher uncle did not object to. He only requested disciple to relay a few words to teacher." Reverend Daoxian was slightly surprised, said, "What words, tell me." Xiao Yi repeated what Tian Buyuyi said. Reverend Daoxian was silent after listening. Xiao Yi secretly sneaked a glance at him. Reverend Daoxian's expression looked complicated. He seemed to be thinking about something. While Xiao Yi was trying to guess what Reverend Daoxian was thinking when Reverend Daoxian suddenly said, "Yi, what do you think of Tian teacher uncle this person?" Xiao Yi was surprised and did not know the subtle meaning of Reverend Daoxian's words. He looked at him, but did not see anything particular, and so could only cautiously said, disciple thinks, Tian teacher uncle this person, is actually quite nice." Reverend Daoxian smiled, apparently was not bothered by this disciple tricky words, leisurely said, "Ah yes. He is a good man, he. It must have been difficult with his looks at that time, his extraordinary talent could actually be discerned by someone." Reverend Daoxian's words suddenly stopped, the room submerged into silence. Xiao Yi moved his body slightly, felt somehow uneasy. A moment later, Reverend Daoxian said, "You have been out for a day, and must be tired, go back and have a rest." Xiao Yi nodded, bowed and said, "Yes." Then slowly backed out. Reverend Daoxian watched his favorite disciple's figure gradually disappeared, was silent for a moment and then again viewed the dark black sky outside the window, slowly stood up and walked out. Soon, his figure merged into the dark night of Qingyun Hill. Although it was late at night, but at the founder's ancestral hall at the secluded back of Tongtian Peak, the altar lamp was still burning in the dark, like an otherworldly fire. The old man, who was keeping watch over the hall, was still up. Right now he was standing before the offering table for Qingyun Hill generations of ancestors' tablets, staring at the names within the dark shadows. Distantly, low insects' cries were heard. In the silence, there seemed to be heartbeat sounds. The night breeze blew past, the altar lamp fire flickered, trembling like breathing. The old man slowly turned around, walked to the altar lamp, gently blocked the incoming wind. Soon, the fire quietened down and started to burn steadily again. The old man gazed at this light, the light reflected in his eyes, like something was burning. In the middle of the night, footstep sounds were suddenly heard. The old man's brows wrinkled slightly, carefully listened and then slowly turned around. His old voice unhurriedly said, didn't expect that you will still come at such a late hour. Reverend Dao Xian's figure slowly emerged from the dark and walked into the founder's ancestral hall. In the dim light, the two elderly men met across each other, for a moment was stunned, caught unaware, and suddenly realized that the other party was actually so old, and then thought, isn't he himself also the same case? Reverend Dao Xian was silent, stared at that old man for a long time, and then slowly came to the table, stood under the Qingyun sect generations of ancestors' tablets, slowly straightened his body. The old man walked to his back and was too silent. In the dark, invisible dignified aura emitted slowly from those, like deep scars that time could not erase. Reverend Dao Xian, expressionless, picked up 3 incense sticks from the table, walked to the candle and lighted them, holding solemnly with both of his hands, respectfully bowed 3 times to the ancestral tablets, and then stepped forward and inserted into the incense burner. The faint smoke, curled up from burner, diffused in the mid-air, making those ancestral tablets looked even more hazy, indistinctly like a pair of eyes, coldly looking at these 2 old men and this world. Offering incense in the middle of the night, is there any difficult problems? The old man asked indifferently, his tone flat, like he was talking about something that had nothing to do with himself. Reverend Dao Xian did not look back at him, his eyes staring at those dignified tablets behind the faint smoke. A moment later, he slowly said, say, after we have passed on, when the later generations offer sacrifices to us, what kind of feelings will they be having? The old man grunted, said, for you, naturally it will be full of reverence, as for me, will anyone still remember me? Reverend Dao Xian did not take offense on the elderly's slightly sarcastic words, only faintly smiled. Then he quietly said, now that the catastrophe is before us, the world is plunged into misery, suffering from the rampant actions of the evil beasts. When I think of the inevitable war between Qingyun and the evil beast, and the world's fate is at risk, all of these heavy responsibilities on my shoulder, I have not slept well for many days. The old man brow frowned, said, you are not complaining to me, right? This is not like you. Reverend Dao Xian looked at the old man a moment, suddenly laughed out and then sighed, you and I are hundreds of years of friendship, it is only you who know me best. The old man shook his head and said, I know you. If so, I will not be here guarding the ancestral hall. All right, let's not talk superfluous words, what exactly are you trying to say? Reverend Dao Xian seemed to be particularly tolerant of the elderly man, he retorted several times, but Dao Xian did not mind. Looking slightly solemn, he slowly said, I have already decided, the implications of this battle is too great, for the survival of the common people. I want to remove the heaven's secret seals of the 7 mountain summits of Qingyun. That old man's face suddenly froze, his brows frowning deeply, looked intently at Dao Xian. Dao Xian looked frankly back at him. After a long time later, the old man slowly said, this matter, you have thought over it carefully. Dao Xian slowly nodded and said, but today when I secretly informed the other 6 leaders, Qian Bu Yi requested someone to convey some words to me, advised me to be careful of the vicious energy backlash. The old man smiled coldly, turned to face those ancestral tablets, after a long while, said, it's not like you have not entered illusory moon cave before, what is inside, you know if yourself. His voice suddenly turned gentler, also with a trace of helplessness, said, look out for yourself. Reverend Dao Xian did not speak. A moment later too raised his head, watching the shadows in the darkness. That silent dignity seemed to be mocking silently in the dark. 7 days later, the areas around Qingyun Hill started to have more and more news of the demonic beasts, within a radius of 100 miles, with Heyang City at the foot of the mountain as center. Everywhere refuges could be seen. As if right now the world, only that towering and lofty Qingyun Hill, could give some comfort and security feelings to the people. And in the hubbub of the crowds, Heyang City was the most chaotic. The streets were full of people, the city's inns were long full, the incoming refugees could only sleep in the open. Under such circumstances, the city's food supply had become extremely tight. Fortunately the city was beside the river, they did not have to worry about the water supply. Actually, under such chaotic situation, it would be difficult to ensure that there would not be looting and murder and other bad things, and the fact was, from time to time there was really such news. The previous day who had disappeared, and today someone's corpse was on the street. But Heyang City was after all at the foot of Qingyun Hill. Qing Yunhil had also made some early preparations, dispatched a considerable number of disciples in the city to maintain order, so in general those numerous refugees in this catastrophe were still safe. But, following the rumors of the demonic beasts spreading worse and worse with each day, who could predict what tomorrow would be like? Under these circumstances, Heyang City's atmosphere became more and more uneasy. And also in such circumstances, Zhu Yixian, who roamed the Jianghu together with his granddaughter, Xiao Huan, and wild dog Taoist, came to this city. Standing in the streets, which used to be spacious, right now they could only see dense population of humans' heads moving. It was crowded to the point where it was hard to even walk. Wild dog Taoist was still all right, but Zhu Yixian and Xiao Huan was dumbfounded. Relying on wild dog Taoist's sturdy body and fierce-looking face, he opened the way for them. Those weaker ones were pushed aside. Those stronger ones, who saw wild dog Taoist's face, when they turned around, most did not dare to say anything. Zhu Yixian and Xiao Huan followed wild dog closely, managed to move forward, sweating profusely along the way, and finally passed through this street, into another small alley on the west side of the city. The three walked on, although the secluded alley right now was also full of people, but compared to the big street outside, here could said to be spacious. Zhu Yixian cursed softly, looked extremely pissed. Forget it that I this old man have to run for my life. Why are there so many people too running for their lives? In the end make me this old man so uncomfortable while running for my life and so on. The alley was very long, twisted and turned, lesser and lesser people headed in. After walking about an hour, the three of them reached the end of the alley. There was no longer any refugees in this area. The reason was very simple, because there was morgue here, but looking at this small morgue derelict courtyard, even half of its wooden door had fell to the ground, the other half missing, not sure if it was taken by people for firewood. Zhu Yixian looked at this morgue, shook his head, sighed. Xiao Huan stood beside him, whispered, said, "Grandfather." Wild Dog was puzzled, but he came from the evil sect, and was not bothered by these ominous morgue, feeling slightly bewildered that Zhu Yixian and Xiao Huan would come to this place. Zhu Yixian, after a long while, said, "Let's go in. Anyway, this place should be relatively quiet." When he finished, he first went inside. Xiao Huan and Wild Dog followed behind. They saw in the small courtyard, trees and grasses bleak and desolated, remnants of wood shavings and roof beams could be seen lying disorderly everywhere. There were some white stuffs in the grasses that glimmered. Xiao Huan looked pale, and could not help but pull Zhu Yixian's clothes. Zhu Yixian turned and looked at her, quietly reassured her, "It's not the first time here. What are you afraid of? Besides, here is where your father lives. Will he harm us?" Xiao Huan nodded, her face looking better. Wild Dog Taoist frowning at the back, but did not say anything. Ahead of the courtyard was the door to the morgue. Zhu Yixian went up and saw the door was covered with dust. Just how long did no one come? He did not speak, shook his head, another sigh, and opened the door. Gya, the wooden door made a harsh sound, slowly retreated inside. A moldy smell assaulted them. In the dim light, 3 coffins were lying disorderly, but the coffins' covers had already dropped to the side. The years of desolation, as if in this small room, slowly emitted out. Zhu Yixian's mouth twitched, his face bleak, slowly walked in, disregarding those coffins. He walked straight to the offering table, looked at the spiritual tablets that were lying disorderly. The room was quiet. It seemed that no one dared to speak. Zhu Yixian slowly stretched his hand out, picked up the tablets and slowly wiped the thick layer of dust, placed it beside and then found another one, and so on. When he cleared the 7th spiritual tablets, saw that the tablet read, "Tablet of beloved son of Zhu Xingyun." Zhu Yixian stopped, silently looked at the tablet. After gazing for a long time, Xiao Huan slowly walked over, saw the tablet in his hand, teared and quietly said, "Grandfather, keep father's spiritual tablet properly away." Zhu Yixian heaved a long sigh, his face looked desolate, nodded his head. Xiao Huan took the tablet from his hands, carefully placed it on the table and then stepped back, placed her hands together, respectfully bowed to the tablet, quietly said, "Father, I have come with grandfather again to visit you. These few years thanks to your blessing, although grandfather and I roam the world, but everything is good. Today we came back to clean you up properly. Hope you will not blame us." She then respectfully bowed 3 times. Wild Dog Taoist watched from the back, suddenly came to the front and also bowed 3 times to the tablet. Zhu Yixian and Xiao Huan were instead shocked. Xiao Huan exclaimed, "Priest, why did you?" Wild Dog Taoist did not look at Zhu Yixian's strange expression, said, "Since he is your father, he is also my senior, coming here, paying respect to senior, it is ought to." Xiao Huan then felt relieved, nodded and said, "Then I thank you." She turned to the tablet and said, "Father, this is Wild Dog Taoist, he is a good man and gave a lot of help to grandfather and me." Zhu Yixian snorted, said, "Is he considered a good person, snort snort, harboring evil intentions?" Wild Dog Taoist's expression froze, but Xiao Huan had already glared at Zhu Yixian, said, "Grandfather, how can you talk nonsense?" Zhu Yixian rolled up his eyes, turned around to look elsewhere. Wild Dog Taoist gratefully looked at Xiao Huan, and was about to speak when suddenly his body stiffened and he abruptly turned around. Xiao Huan and Zhu Yixian seemed to sense something. Almost at the same time looked towards the entrance. In the desolate quiet morgue, at the entrance, suddenly a man in black appeared, even his face was also veiled in black, an unexplainable weirdness. The ambience created by Zhu Yixian and the rest, right now with the appearance of the man, suddenly sank into an even deathly silence. Wild Dog Taoist's expression changed greatly, his lips moved a few times and finally slowly hoarsely said, "Mr. Ghost. This video will end here.